Good afternoon. I call to order the hearing of the Intelligence Special Operations Subcommittee of the House Armed Services Committee. I need to do some formalities first. Members who are joining remotely must be visible on screen for the purposes of identity verification, establishing and maintaining a quorum, participating in the proceeding, and voting. Those members must continue to use the software platform's video function while in attendance, unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render them unable to participate on camera. If a member experiences technical difficulties, they should contact committee staff for assistance. Video of members' participation will be broadcast in the room and via the television internet feeds. Members participating remotely must seek recognition verbally, and they are asked to mute their microphones when they are not speaking. Members who are participating remotely are reminded to keep the software platform's video function on the entire time they attend the proceeding. Members may leave and rejoin the proceeding. If members depart for a short while for reasons other than joining a different proceeding, they should leave the video function on. If members will be absent for a significant period or depart to join a different proceeding, they should exit the software platform entirely and then rejoin it if they return. Members may use the software platform's chat feature to communicate with staff regarding technical or logistical support issues only. Finally, I have designated a committee staff member to, if necessary, mute unrecognized members' microphones to cancel any inadvertent background noise that may disrupt the proceedings. Thank you. I would like now to welcome our today's witnesses, Mr. Ronald Moultrie, Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, General Paul Nakasone, Director of the National Security Agency, Chief of the Central Security Service and Commander of U.S. Cybercom, and Lieutenant General Scott Barrier, Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. I'm pleased to see each of you today. This hearing takes place during a very perilous time. Russia's invasion of Ukraine just shows how crucial it is to maintain strong democratic alliances and partnerships. It also reinforces the importance of the work being done by the Defense Intelligence Enterprise, from exposing Russia's destructive disinformation to working with our allies and partners to share critical intelligence and ensuring our intelligence apparatus is agile so we can respond to the needs of each combat commander. Russia's unprovoked assault on Ukraine's sovereignty threatens the world order and represents a dangerous level of aggression. As the situation in Europe unfolds, I am also concerned about China's threatening posture toward Taiwan, the threats we face from Iran and its proxies, and North Korea's persistent testing of ballistic missiles. We also continue to face threats from extremist groups who would, given the opportunity, strike us on our own homeland. We could only effectively combat these challenges with close collaboration with allies and partners, especially through our intelligence partnerships. I'm interested in hearing today how the Defense Intelligence Enterprise is implementing reforms that this subcommittee and the FY22 NDAA to ensure that we are better postured to quickly provide releasable intelligence to command commanders to combat malign disinformation and support DoD messaging and influence operations. In the interest of time, I asked the witnesses to keep their opening remarks brief so that we will have more time for the closed session. Yep. With that, I will now turn this over to Ranking Member Kelly for any opening remarks. In the meantime, I will try to get a little
in the
time
interest of brevity, first of all, Lieutenant General Barrier, General Nakasone, Mr. Moultrie, Secretary Moultrie, thank y'all for being here. Thank you for what you do for America every day. This is one of the most important posture hearings I think that we have. I won't have a lot to say in the open session. I think the things we need to say are not for political purposes and other things. I look forward to the closed session where you guys can tell us what you need to do the things that America needs you to do. And thank you and all the men and women who serve under you for their service.
Thank you, Ranking Member Kelly. We'll now hear from our witnesses, then move to question and answer session. Immediately following one round of questions, we will reconvene for the classified session, which will take place in Rayburn 2212. I'll now recognize Mr. Moultrie.
Thank you, Chairman Gallego, Ranking Member Kelly, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. It's a privilege to testify on the current posture of the Defense Intelligence and Security Enterprise in addressing the threats facing the United States of America, its allies, and partners. The Department of Defense's intelligence and security professionals work every day to address the current and future threats facing our nation. On their behalf, I wish to thank the members of this subcommittee for your continued support and partnership. I am joined in my testimony today by Generals Nakasone and General Barrier. They will provide you with a more comprehensive picture of how we support our warfighters as well as characterize the challenges we all face. The Department of Defense trusts the intelligence community to respond to the threats that we will all hear about. General Barrier, over to you, sir.
Chairman Gallego, Ranking Member Kelly, distinguished members, I do have a statement here. I can forego this statement if you would like to get to questions.
General, we'll skip to questions.
Chairman, I'll forgo my statement as well.
Great, thank you. Appreciate the for all of our witnesses. All right. Thank you. And this is to all of our witnesses. I'm interested in hearing about progress made to implement the FY22 reforms to better support combat commanders' need for releasable intelligence. Given the situation in Ukraine, I will ask two sets of questions. First, could you share specific examples of intelligence sharing to combat disinformation, such as exposing Russia's false flags, and intelligence sharing that could literally save lives? Second, I would like to learn more about our intelligence sharing with Ukraine. Are we able to share intelligence in real time or near real time with Ukrainians, and are they able to communicate with the U.S.? And what do those communication channels look like? If you can answer as much as possible now, we can also follow up in the greater detail in the classified session.
Yes, Chairman Gallego, I would prefer to answer questions on the intelligence that we're sharing in terms of false flag and what we're doing in terms of near real-time intelligence in closed session. I would say that the intelligence that we are sharing and the work that we're doing to support the Ukrainian government is making a difference. It's accurate, it's timely, and it's actionable. And so we think that we are supporting them in such a way that they are pleased with what we are providing. And I'll forego the rest of my comments until we get into closed session, sir.
Chairman, if I might, I'll defer the specifics to closed session, but I think when we consider what the intelligence community writ large and our defense intelligence establishment has been able to do here, I would characterize it like this. Our ability to share intelligence is for a number of different consumers. First of all, the sharing of intelligence to build a coalition. Secondly, the sharing of intelligence to ensure that we shine a light on disinformation operations, what you referred to before. And the third piece is, how do we share information that's relevant, that's actionable, that is able to be utilized by the Ukrainians? All three of those areas, I would tell you, I've never seen it better in the 35 years that I've spent in uniform.
Chairman, I would say where we're at is it's revolutionary in terms of what we've been able to do, and I can provide great detail in terms of the how and the what we're sharing in the closed session.
Thank you. General Barrier, how is DIA as a functional manager for open source intelligence for DoD, ensuring efforts are synchronized and coordinated to avoid duplicative data purchases?
Chairman, the Open Source Intelligence Center assigned to DI is working that very hard with the intelligence community. As you probably know, the CIA is the community manager for open source. DI has been designated as the Defense Intelligence Enterprise open source functional manager. We're taking that role on now, and we are devising our way through really how we organize ourselves for the sharing of the information, the tools that we'll use, the training, and the tradecraft. And a big part of this is making sure that across the Defense Intelligence Enterprise, we're not getting ripped off for the data that we're purchasing, and putting a structure in place to allow us to understand what that data is, catalog it, and be able to understand who's paying for what.
Thank you. General Nakasone, as you know, the NDA requires that certain conditions be met prior to ending the dual hat of the commander of U.S. Cyber Command also serving as the director of the NSA. There seems to be a natural partnership between the organizations, but I want to get your view on the future of the dual hat relationship. Is it realistic to expect either organization to operate independently?
So, Chairman, if I might, I'm approaching 4 years in the job, and so I'll reflect on my experiences. At the end of the day, this is a policy decision that obviously will be made by others, but my best military advice, as it was when I first came in the job and after 3+ years in it, is the fact that through elections, through problems with Iran, through ransomware, and now with Russia, Ukraine, what the dual hat has allowed us to do is been able to take and be able to focus efforts from the National Security Agency and U.S. Cyber Command on very difficult problems. Influence, ransomware, strategic competition. In one domain, it's cyberspace. We both operate there, and being able to have action, being able to unity effort, and being able to have agility is what the dual hat's been able to allow me to do over the past 3+ years.
Sounds like a pretty good endorsement for me. Ranking Member Kelly?
Just really quick, and Chairman Gallego asked this question, but so it's more of a comment because you answered the question, General Barry and General Nakasone. But open source is really important. Sometimes we just don't want to disclose how we know stuff, and if it's open source, then we don't have to. A lot of times, if it comes from the U.S. government, people tend to doubt it, but if it's from some other source other than the U.S. government, it adds more credibility to it. And there are a lot of open source, and I've talked to several of those these weeks. What I would like for you guys to do is, what ways can, rather than contracting with a company to do certain things, can we not buy what we need when we need it? I.e., if we were right now, are there satellite companies that can tell us, how many bushels of corn are in Ukraine? Or can they tell us the refugee flow? Can they do a lot of other things that we don't have to do, especially with some of the false flag information that Russia has been putting out? Can we go to those and say, hey, we want to buy this information and have them put it out?
Ranking Member Kelly, that's a great question. As we try to organize ourselves within the defense intelligence enterprise side of this, I think those are the questions we need to ask ourselves and pursue those strategies to be smarter, better, faster as we do this.
Because I see open source, a lot of time it just adds credibility rather than the other. And I guess the second question is, I would have said in my opening comments that I had some, what extent are we able to collect meaningful intelligence over the horizon in Afghanistan? And also, are there open source things that can help us with that information that we can also use?
Ranking Member, I would prefer to discuss the over the horizon mission in a closed session, and there are open sources that we can use to help us in Afghanistan.
And then the final question, just a general sense, we'll discuss this more in the closed hearing, but overall, just for the public to see that they have to know we're going to closed session to talk about all the important things. Overall, what does our budget look like, or what does that look like? What is your request going to look like, and what things in a general sense can you talk about here?
Yes, Ranking Member Kelly, our budget, I think, is going to reflect the President's priorities. It will really focus on how we're focusing the enterprise on integrated deterrence, how we're still campaigning against our pacing challenge, which is China, and also how we are trying to build what I would call a decisive information advantage to ensure that our policymakers as well as our warfighters have the information that they need to do the mission that is required of them every day, sir.
And Ranking Member, I would add to that, for us at the National Security Agency, as we look at it, we look at a budget that's going to be able to support us in competition, be able to support us in crisis, be able to support us in conflict, because as a global power, we'll be in many, many different phases of this throughout the next and many years to come.
I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member. Representative Scott is next.
I'm sorry, I assumed it would go back to a Democrat.
Who's going to yield to me?
No, but I do want to tell you, I personally believe the intelligence back in December was the best collection job that I've seen in my 10 years in Congress with regard to Russia's plans for the Ukraine. And I do think, and I know it was a big decision to declassify and to share it with the world, I do think that the world has benefited from the declassifying and the sharing of that information so that they were prepared for, at least they expected it. Maybe if we weren't prepared for it. Undersecretary Moultrie, I've asked our different commanders for the various areas of responsibility to look at what a 5% and a 10% reduction in the global food supply means for the geopolitical stability around the world. I want to point out to you particularly that the Ukraine is responsible for putting 50 million metric tons of corn and wheat into the export markets. They are the largest supplier of food to the World Food Program. If you look at what is happening in, there's tremendous civil unrest in Sri Lanka today, which is 4,000 miles away from the Ukraine. I do think that the Defense Intelligence Agency needs to do an analysis of what a 5% and a 10% reduction in the global food supply looks like in the different areas of responsibility. Russia is saying they're not going to export. They are the second largest exporter of wheat in the world, if I'm not mistaken, behind Ukraine. And you look at the whole Black Sea trade area, the food supply that comes through that area is effectively shut down. Belarus and Russia are the number 2 and number 3 potash suppliers, which are fertilizer for the world's crops. And I kind of feel like Vladimir Putin has started World War III with regard to the global food supply and the geopolitical unrest that is going to come from that. And certainly much respect for President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people for the fight they're putting up, and I hope they keep fighting, and hope we keep giving them all of the intel they need and weapons that they would need to put up that good fight. But I am very worried about what this means for other areas of the world as well. So we'll be looking for that information from you as time pushes forward. But I do think that the UN is expecting tremendous political instability because of the food supply. With that, I'll save the remainder of my questions for a closed door, but I look forward to seeing that.
Thank you, Representative Scott. Representative Bacon?
Thank you. I did have some questions too on maybe the cost of sharing all this intelligence, but we'll wait till the next closed thing. But I do have a couple questions for General Nakasone. I have a cyber defense bill that directs the federal government to do more to help defend private industry and our infrastructure. It passed out of committee unanimously. I know we have things like CISA, we got the FERC, but is there a bigger role for Cyber Command and NSA to help out in our private sector? And the reason I say that, we had JBS attacked, we had the Colonial Pipeline attack, and these folks can't go up against the intelligence services of Russia. They need your expertise, but your thoughts, sir?
So in terms of our role at the National Security Agency, I think, Congressman, you're well aware that one of our 2 missions is cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. Our focus has been outside the United States foreign intelligence and being able to bring the insights of what cyber adversaries are doing outside of our country to be able to inform what's going on the inside of our country. We have a responsibility as part of the defense industrial base to ensure the protection of that. As you're well aware, 16 different sectors in our critical infrastructure, that's the one DoD is focused on. But for us in general, I think the secret sauce that we bring at NSA is clearly what our adversaries are doing outside of the country, and then being able to share it more broadly with, obviously, the interagency and the private sector.
Am I really down to 33 seconds to that?
No, go.
Okay, something happened here.
Sorry about that.
That was the fastest
We got
5
to
minutes I
restart
ever came across. I'd like to bring up another thing that was a big issue when I got elected in 2016 and swore the oath in 2017. There was a push to separate Cyber Command and NSA, make 2 different 4-star headquarters. I always opposed it because being an old ISR Air Force guy, I know how important NSA is to the Cyber Command mission. They're very much integrated. And if you had 2 4-stars going different directions, you have a dysfunctional situation. So is that discussion pretty much off the table now? Because I like the way it's set up now.
So again, Congressman, that's really a discussion on the policy level that that does come up at times, and I know that I've answered questions before a number of committees on that. But again, that is still something that is being considered.
Well, for what it's worth, I'll oppose it, and I hope the Congress does. You need unified direction, and I think your leadership of both of those organizations provide that unified direction. So I don't know, maybe I should have asked Mr. Moultrie that question, but sir, do you have any comments?
Yes, sir, I would say that from a Department of Defense perspective, we certainly recognize the value of the dual hat role that General Nakasone has played for the last 4 years, and the role of Cyber Command and NSA over the last 12 years plus. I believe that the dual hat will be looked at again just by this administration, just to ensure that we understand what the value added is, but also what the impacts are. Mm-hmm. And so that discussion is still ongoing within the department today. We understand that there is sentiment on both sides to really not do any harm. But I believe that it will be looked at. I think it'll be an objective look, and we'll make sure we brief that out to you, sir.
If I may just elaborate a little more, I mean, these cyber teams, the core of them are NSA folks. So if you have 2 4-stars with different visions and different direction, I don't see how you keep a unified direction for the cyber team. But that's just my 2 cents of being down at the 05, 06, 07 level when I was in. One last question, and it's for General Barrier and General Nakasone. I flew in the RC-135s, traditional ISR aircraft. There's a push amongst some to go to all 5th gen type of collection capabilities, penetrating ISR. But we know day in and day out, we do not penetrate China's airspace, or we don't penetrate Russia's airspace, right? So we still need some of that traditional ISR, because that's what's the bulk of our collection. So I guess my question is, are we keeping the right balance between the traditional ISR and penetrating ISR? And do you see a need to maintain some of these older platforms?
Congressman, with my Army hat on, coming out of the G2 job, there is this balance between ISR and competition and ISR and conflict, and certainly as we're seeing this play out inside Ukraine, we would never fly those platforms into an envelope where they could get shot down or engaged. But certainly in competition, I think there is value for ISR platforms that can collect on the periphery and actually analyze and process that information.
Congressman, I would offer as the SIG and functional manager for the Defense Intelligence Establishment here, we need to have a variety of platforms, whether or not they're from space, whether or not they're airborne, whether or not they're terrestrial. All of these obviously stitched together for a very, very complex and very, very important look on what our adversaries are doing in many parts of the world. So I know the Chief of Staff of the Air Force is looking at a number of different platforms, but from my perspective, having a wide variety of these platforms is really important for us to do our mission.
So you still keep a high priority for the RC-135?
Yeah. Mr. Bacon.
So thank you, Congressman.
Said a minute left.
I rolled over from your last one. Thank you. We could take that in the briefing. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today with us. One of the areas that I've been particularly interested in during my time in Congress is the use of deep fakes. We see them used here domestically, but also by our adversaries overseas. I secured some report language in the FY20 Intel Authorization Act on just getting a sense of how our adversaries have weaponized these deep fakes as a tool to shape the information environment. And in fact, even recently, I saw that the Russians produced a deepfake video of President Zelensky urging Ukrainians to stop fighting, and that was broadcast on Ukrainian television yesterday. So we're seeing the use of it and the deployment of it quite broadly. And so my question for you, General Nakasone, is, how have you seen in your time that technology evolve? Where do you think it's headed? And then do you feel like our intelligence community is prepared, or how are you preparing for the evolution of that threat?
So, Congressman, I think you identified one of those key areas that I've seen over the past 3 years in this job, which is the growth of influence operations by our adversaries. Deep fakes, or the ability to use video and in some form or fashion that is intended to send a message, is one of those ways. So how are we doing it? At the National Security Agency, we're working very, very closely with our research directorate to understand the anomalies, understand the technology, understand the key pieces of what we can determine what is real and what is fake. But the other point really is that it goes to Ranking Member Kelly's point, which is this is also an area we're partnering very, very closely with the private sector that has done some very, very leading work that we've been able to obviously have discussions with them on that. So this is an area that we continue to watch very, very carefully, act very, very rapidly in, and I think we'll have a number of different areas that we probably can discuss in closed session as well.
Thank you, General. And Mr. Moultrie, I'm a polyglot myself, and I know that when I was in the private sector, I often read open source information in language to get a full sense of what's going on and get the context of what's going on in a country or in a conflict. I was wondering, foreign language skills are clearly a tool that is important to the defense intelligence community. And it's going to be increasingly, I think, an important part, especially as we look at great power competition. And so we're not just talking about Mandarin but we're also talking about Tagalog, Indonesian, other languages like that. it will be necessary for us to have it to be able to work with our partners as well as to understand our adversaries. I was wondering, do you consider the Defense Intelligence Enterprise's existing foreign language capabilities to be sufficient for today's great power competition? And if not, what are some areas in which we need to invest more? How do we get more analysts and operators who are proficient in foreign language?
Yes, Congressman. In terms of language, it's one of the more important things that we do, and I'll talk more about it. I would like to talk more about it in closed session. When we look at the capabilities that we talk about here, regardless of the domain that we're talking about, whether it be space, whether it be ground, whether it be ISR, or whether it be cyber, our language capabilities are just absolutely essential. So we actually are looking at it, and as you said, the various languages, the competition languages, whether it be Mandarin or Russian or other languages that we are concerned about, regional languages such as Farsi or Urdu or Pashto, those languages are all extremely important to us. There are some things that we're doing that are underway right now to help us not only gauge what we will need today, but what we will also need for the future. I'd like to talk about that in more depth in closed session. Thank you.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Murphy. Representative Larson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe this can be answered in this session, this question. I understand the sensitivity around all the other things, certainly. But last, Secretary Boltry, your office plays a critical role in the Defense Intelligence Enterprise. Understanding the growth in your office in recent years, the GAO did a report last year in May, citing several challenges with oversight, including governance bodies not operating as intended and so on, all the issues. Can you discuss a little bit what's being done to address those challenges that the GAO identified and provide more active and effective oversight of the Defense Intelligence Enterprise?
Yes, Congressman Larson. The GAO report that you referenced here from May of 2021 was something that we took to heart. We've looked at it and we've decided that we need to move out. We need to move out aggressively on it. So what we are doing are four things, sir. We're looking at the roles, responsibilities, and functions in our organization, ensuring that we understand clearly what those components are. Then we're trying, number two, to match what our people are actually doing to the roles that they should be doing to ensure that they are doing what we need to do to measure what's occurring within the Defense Intelligence and Security Enterprise, I'll add. Thirdly, metrics. We need to make sure that we have metrics to see if we're adding value in terms of our oversight and governance role. And then lastly, the people piece of this, just ensuring that we have the right skill level, that we have the right backgrounds and focus on this are something that we're doing. We're being assisted in this by some independent analysis being done by IDA, independent analysis coming out of Princeton. And we hope to have something back to you and to this committee in full by the fall of this year, sir.
That's great, thanks. Related to Representative Murphy's questions about kind of folks that you need, you mentioned language, and maybe you can have to answer in closed session. But in terms of subject matter or certain expertise, maybe on the technical side, what kind of work do you need to do to recruit folks into that part of the enterprise?
Congressman, the skill sets that our individuals need on the language side and analytics side run the gamut from being able to understand military operations, being able to understand economic issues, being able to understand diplomatic issues. And so you can imagine that everything that we talk about, whether it be in our government and how we are moving economically, how we are looking at research, we have to understand that in some 100+ languages around the world. And we have to understand it to the extent that our adversaries may talk about it. It's a daunting challenge, and finding those skills, it's something that we have to compete for. So that's something that we're focused on. I'll talk about that more in closed session, but it is a top priority of the intelligence communities and the Defense Intelligence Enterprises, and we're working that jointly across not just the Defense Intelligence Enterprise, but across the IC and the interagency.
Okay, thanks. And finally, maybe perhaps for General Nakasone, some of us, certainly I have been tracking the strategic support forces in the Chinese PLA, where it's cyber warfare as well as EW, REST, and so on. Maybe this is an answer for the next session, but since it's been reorganized and kind of really stood up over the last several years, but really more traction over the last couple of years, whether or not you've seen an increased sophistication as opposed to just an increased investment from the PLA.
So, Congressman, as you can well imagine, we track this very carefully and very closely. I would like to take this up in closed session just to talk about scope and scale, sophistication, and what we're seeing, because I do think it probably can answer your question more fully.
That's great. Thank you. I'll yield back.
Thank you. Representative Panetta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Pivoting on to languages, Mr. Moultrie, can you explain what role the Defense Language Institute plays in some of this training that you talked about, please?
Well, Congressman, as a graduate of the Defense Language
you
Institute
go.
some 40-plus years ago, and my wife is also a graduate,
Outstanding.
both Russian linguists, I might add, I can tell you it plays a critical role, right? And so we see it more so today than we ever have, if you will. When you look at what's going on in the Ukraine, having those individuals, one of the challenges that we appear to have is, focusing on the problem of today and not focusing on the problem that we might have tomorrow. So the Defense Language Institute Foreign Language Center
There you go.
has played a key role. It's a place that I have tried to visit every year. I am planning to go out there again this year. They're that training ground for defense, intelligence, and security, where we get the nation's best, most trained language. And I'm proud to say, as a person that's gone back there frequently, it is light years ahead of where it was when I was there. Individuals are doing in 12 weeks what I was doing in 36 weeks. Plays a key role, and we want to make sure we're supporting it. We're going to do that across the enterprise, not just within the Defense Intelligence Enterprise, but also personnel readiness, and both with the National Security Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agencies, and others in the Department of Defense.
Outstanding. And did I mention it's in my congressional district?
I know that, sir. Absolutely.
And thank you. And I look forward to hosting you out there. If you do come out there, please let me know. I'd be happy to host you as well. Thank you.
Will do, sir.
Thank you. General Nakasone, just quickly, it seems that information operations subcomponents appear to be fractured across the defense apparatus. And despite the forthcoming doctrine for operations in the information environment, there doesn't seem to be a jointly recognized idea on what information operations should prioritize. Do you believe that establishing a sub-unified combatant command for information operations within U.S. Cybercom could allow for joint information operations training and execution?
So, Congressman, I'm not sure it's a fit or a solution that's built to a sub-unified command. Here's what I do believe. We use information operations in every cyber mission that we do. It's that important to what's going on to be able to communicate a message to an adversary. What I would say is we need more information operations trained personnel that come to our command. That's one of the areas that I'm working very, very closely with the services. I know my own service and other services have taken this on very seriously, but I think that is what we have to get to first is let's get more trained information operations specialists. Let's integrate them into our teams, and instead of building a separate command, let's make sure that we understand that information operations spans an entire spectrum of what we need to do.
You sounds like you have a good idea. Do you have any more information on that plan as to what you can do, how you can improve training our forces to jointly employ information operations and operations in the information environment?
What I would like to do, Congressman, if I can, is give you some very specific examples in closed session, because I think this will clearly indicate the importance of what we're applying to it and what the services have been providing and what we need more of.
Outstanding. Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. And this concludes the open session. We will be moving directly over to 2212 for a classified session. Thank you.